Huddle up, tailgate season is here, and there's no better place to gear up than Academy Sports and Outdoors. Want a grill that says my barbecue is just as good as my smack talk? They've got you. A cooler that screams I hold 47 cans to keep my cool. Even in overtime, they've got that as well. And fan gear that says I score more style points than a football spinning, backflipping, funky chicken touchdown dance. Academy has it as well at undefeatable prices because here, the fun can't lose. And with that, we go to the Buppy's Catering and Bartending Hotline. Josh Pate with us. What's up, Josh?
He is a big partner of mine as well, and you know that I have to do one of those reads. Excuse me, I get to do one of those reads every show. Now, I convinced them to just let me ad-lib it. However, I may just have you send me that ad copy on over. I may just go with that verbatim tonight and challenge myself. I want to top David Nuno. At the very least, I want to pull even with him, because if you're even with Nuno, you're doing pretty good in life.
Well, buddy, I will send it your way, and I look forward to watching that. How are so, for us, we usually start with A&M, but I almost feel like with A&M having the bye week, I don't know if we start with A&M. So we start with Auburn, which is basically starting with A&M. What'd you see from them in a game where they could have easily beat Oklahoma, but it did not work out for them?
Yeah, it pretty much played out how I thought it would. Now, I will say this. You got to be very careful just in college football in general. Auburn happens to be one of these teams. A&M's kind of one of the teams I'm about to describe. You got to be careful pigeonholing teams or defining teams, I guess, first quarter to third of the season, because a lot of them get in what I call ascension mode, and that's where you just hit a different gear. You start improving as a team. Everyone wants to get in that mode. That's the whole goal. So I think Auburn has that potential. I think they may even be doing that a little bit, but for the Oklahoma game, it was pretty obvious to me there was not going to be much of a rhythmic nature to their offense. They weren't going to put together a bunch of 12-play drives. What they were going to have to do is throw the ball up, let big wide receivers win fights on the outside. They were going to have to manufacture a ground game, which they didn't really develop the ability to do all afternoon. Brent Venables was not going to let them win with QB run, which they did against Baylor. And so it was really up to them to find points. And they were there. I mean, as you saw, as you pointed out, they were there. And then the officiating becomes the story. I think the real story is they lost a game they could have won, which happens all the time, but now it puts them in really close to a must-win mode here. If they lose in College Station Saturday, they're 0-2 in conference, just right off the bat. And I think about the desperation mode they're in. I think about a back-to-back road spot. I think about coming in there and playing a rested Texas A&M. And it was always a talking point for me during the spring and summer about schedule. Auburn at Oklahoma was such a hinge game. Because if they won it, they're off to the races. If they lost it, it was going to put them in desperation mode in a really bad scheduling dynamic spot the very next week, and that's where they are. And so here we go, my friend. Here we go.
Well, Josh, I also think for A&M, this game does not determine what happens this season, but I want to see how they handle success, which was a problem, in years past. How they handle being a team in the top 10, a team that comes off an emotional win. You'd get that bye week with I think was good for A&M because of the emotional win. Now we get to find out how they handle success.
Yeah, I also think these seasons with 2 bye weeks, obviously you don't really choose where your bye is, but it can really help out a team that's still finding itself. Because with A&M, they have not won those games. They have not won games like at Notre Dame. So when you win it, and you happen to have one of those byes placed there, it's really advantageous. I mean, you put the bye to use, as I say, in that you don't have to tell your guys, hey, come down off this within 24 hours. It's okay to let them enjoy it a little bit. It's completely fine. But then you also have ample time to yank that hot air balloon back to earth when the time comes, point out all the mistakes, point out how this, that, and that will bite us down the road if we don't correct it. And it's just so nice to be able to have 13 days to do that. So I'd be very surprised if we turned on that game Saturday and we're sitting there saying, boy, look at this hangover. Boy, look, these guys read their own press clippings, that old saying. I doubt that. Now, it's possible that Auburn comes in there, plays their tail off, it's a dogfight, and there's just not a lot of separation between the teams. Auburn wins. That's possible. I don't think it's going to happen because the Notre Dame outcome made people a little too complacent around there. I very strongly doubt that.
So where do you think A&M has the advantage against Auburn?
Well, so they're multiple offensively, and I come out of the Notre Dame game still thinking to myself, you know what, if A&M really has to grind out a game, they can do it. I don't expect them to have to score 40 every win they get this year. This may be the kind of game that profiles like that. But there's also, that's the A scenario. The B scenario is maybe Jackson Arnold did find himself a little bit. Maybe there is a little more business to be had against the A&M secondary. And maybe it is another game where A&M has to start doing that. If they have to start doing that, I think that people really need to pay attention to the potential wide receiver matchup you have in this game. I mean, because you got studs on both sides, and you got takeover ability. We've already seen it from both teams on both sides of this equation. So I think A&M has more ways to dictate the tempo of the game, to dictate the pace of the game. It's why I would slightly lean them in the game. But I also think that I feel kind of the same way as the Notre Dame game. Like if you told me going into it, you're going to get a 21-19 outcome here, wouldn't have shocked me. I think it mildly shocked me that it played out the way it did, but then watching it with revisionist history, I get it. I could see this game going the same way. I could see a very low score profile. I could see a very high score profile. The difference is normally when you say that, David, you're comfortable one way, uncomfortable the other way. I'm actually comfortable with Texas A&M playing in both styles of games.
Josh, my audience has gotten used to me talking about this kind of point, so just bear with me for a moment. But last year and many years, you would read one thing about a team. All right, Lenore Sellers was just sacked 5 times. You know, that offensive line is terrible. You're thinking to yourself, all right, we're going to go after them. A&M versus Notre Dame. Brand new offensive line. Last year, talking about 24. Brand new offensive line. Nick Scorton and company are going to go to town. Didn't get to Riley Leonard. Other ones, Peyton Thorne. Horrible against A&M a couple years ago. Last year, throws for over 300 yards. Looks like Joe Montana. So I say all that to you to set this up. Oklahoma had the 9 sacks against Auburn. How does that translate for potentially what A&M does? Because in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't translate because it always goes the opposite of what I think.
Yeah, every time I see this emphatic result, a stat category that jumps off the page, that's what your mind goes to. So in that one, you mentioned it. It was OU living in the backfield. So the thing that's hard, one of the many things that's hard about predicting sports, predicting college football, is when you see something happen the previous week, your mind says, oh, that is the norm. That is a thing that's going to carry over. Well, in the real world, you're paying a bunch of coaches a whole lot of money. You recruited ultra-talented players. When something emphatic happens, whether it's good or bad, but especially if it's bad, that's where the focus is all week. And a bunch of really talented, really capable people focusing on a same bad thing all week sometimes leads to an opposite result the next week. That makes sense. It's just you kind of have to see it to believe it. Well, here's the problem with that. Also, if someone sacks you 10 times, most of the time there is a sentence that you can say, well, our offensive line's terrible, or, well, our quarterback just held the ball way too long. He froze in the pocket. And you want to assign blame in one sentence. Well, that is not the case as far as I could see it with that Auburn-Oklahoma game. There were some times where O-line let him down. There were some times where, candidly, I just thought Jackson Arnold held the ball too long. And you go back, watch all 22 end zone, and you can see there are guys open. I just don't know that he can work past his first read in the progression. And that's something that you can never really truly know unless you know what the play call was, unless you know what the design was and whatnot. But watching what we're able to watch, I wonder if Brent Venables wasn't good enough to take that first read in a progression away and then just count on the fact that he's not advanced enough to be able to work his way down and work his way through that progression chart. And by the time he does, we'll be there. Because that's what happened pretty much all night. And to answer your question, what would happen if A&M were put in that position? They'd do the exact same thing. A&M has the exact same ability to do that. So especially if Auburn doesn't get a better ground game going, I don't think they just magically clean that up in 1 week, because I don't magically think a quarterback develops that much in 7 days.
Josh, I'm older than you, so I don't know. Did you watch the show 90210 when you were growing up, or were you too young for that?
I was a little bit too young for it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make a terrible comparison, but I feel like what's happening with Lane Kiffin and Whit Weeks and his daughter Landry, it could be taken from an episode of 90210 or whatever the kids are watching today. I'm not smart enough to understand what's happening here. Is Landry trolling her dad, or is she trolling Whit Week? Can you help me understand what's happening?
Short answer is no, I really can't. This is something that has to occur to you in your own time. I would go with maybe 9021 Bro for the title to this whole thing. I believe, as best we can tell, David, and I know everyone is waiting with bated breath for the next chapter in this saga, as far as we can tell, there's either a brilliant psyop or complete treachery being orchestrated by Lane Kiffin's daughter, who has waited until the week of the Ole Miss LSU game to reveal via social media that she is dating LSU's linebacker, Whit Weeks. And so you can look at this one of two ways. And again, I leave it up to interpretation. You can either think about this as brilliant 4D chess, or you could look at it as daddy issues, and I'm going to get back at him by any means necessary. And frankly, all of it makes sense to me, and none of it makes sense at the same time. I know Thanksgiving's eventually coming. Actually, that's during the season, so that wouldn't matter. But, I mean, eventually there's a family get-together coming wherein she brings him around, and they're all sitting at the same table. And conversation about this game and about the lead-up to this game has to happen. And that's really what I'd pay to see, more so than even the game itself. That's really the dynamic I'd like to be a voyeur to.
Well, I look at this game beyond the drama, and I'm having a hard time with it because I think LSU is that good. And then I'm like, but the Clemson game, I'm overvaluing that game. What have they really done? Then I look at Ole Miss. I'm like, I thought they'd take a step back. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They seem to be moving. I don't know how to, and they're at home. How do you see this game playing out?
I am excited to see LSU face a really legitimate passing attack. And apparently it doesn't even matter which quarterback OU or Ole Miss rolls with. The statement is valid. I'm excited to see that because really what happens in college football a lot of times is defenses will get a reputation, and sometimes it's authentic, and then sometimes it's just born through the fact that they haven't played anybody. I think about some Notre Dame teams in the past. They don't play a high-level, multiple offensive attack, and then they do, and they get exposed. In the old days, that would happen with the Big Ten. They just play Wisconsin 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and they look dominant. And then they face an actual passing attack, and you realize, oh, it's just a bunch of stocky linebackers. They can't really move. So that is not LSU. LSU is ultra-athletic. So I doubt that anyone's going to really put them in a blender defensively, but you don't have to put them in a blender. What if you score 27 on them? I mean, what if Ole Miss scores 27? Well, then the follow-up is Garrett Nussmeier 100%? Can that offense score 30 if it needs to right now against a high-level opponent on the road? Because they didn't need to against Clemson, and that's credit to their defense. They didn't need to against Florida. Again, that's credit to their defense. And if they're going to get Trinidad Chambliss to toss 5 picks, then so be it. But you can't just count on that every week. So this is a really good test for them. I also wonder about the Ole Miss side of things. That offensive line hadn't been tested like this yet. That offensive line hadn't had a defensive front that can get after them. And so for all that good-looking rhythm they've had offensively, well, someone could crowbar all that. And that someone could be LSU. I feel like out of all these big matchups this weekend, that one's one of the toughest to get a read on because each one has a pretty defined strength that has not truly been put to the test against quality competition, and it's going to happen 2 ways Saturday.
Who do you think is the best story in the SEC? What program, and why is it Vanderbilt? Sorry for answering for you.
Well, it definitely is Vanderbilt, and I think the answer there is pretty obvious. I mean, I live in Nashville, so they're selling out their games with their fans, which sounds commonsensical to people in College Station. It's not. They've never done it here. Anytime Vanderbilt Stadium's been sold out, it's because Georgia's in town, and all of their fans just look for a good weekend in Nashville, and they come sell it out. It's like 80% road fans. Well, Vanderbilt is selling their stadium out. Vanderbilt has one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and everyone knows he'll never play on Sunday. Like, everyone knows this is a college football story, and that's where it ends. And that's great because some of us love college football first and foremost. You've got a head coach there in Clark Lee, whose name would be at the forefront for any coaching opening, except for the fact that his representation's not floating his name because he doesn't want to leave. I think it's crazy that we've got Vanderbilt doing something that's historic. I don't think they've never done this. They've never been relevant to this degree for this prolonged a period of time. And if they were, history shows the head coach would be on the first thing smoking out of Nashville. Clark Lee's not even looking to leave because he has a unique attachment to the program. So you got all that happening. But I would also ask you this, David, like if we were to remove Vanderbilt or set them on their own shelf, on the next shelf, I'd say Missouri is a pretty good story as well. Because Missouri's sitting there under Eli Drinkwitz, and I was just watching them. Like I just paused them to talk to you. And I really think people are still underrating what they are because they haven't played a high-level opponent either. Because I don't think most of the country watched them play South Carolina. They won't watch them until Alabama comes in there in a couple of weeks, which, by the way, Missouri's off a bye, welcoming Alabama at home before that. Just FYI, just a little heads up. So they went and got Bo Perbula from Penn State, and it's gotten to the point now where Penn State folks are sitting there openly speculating about whether they let the wrong quarterback walk away. That's how good Perbula has been as they've watched him. He's a perfect fit in Eli's offense. Ahmad Hardy, if he were doing what he's doing on the ground for Texas or for Oklahoma or for USC, would be in the Heisman conversation right now. They also hit on the portal at linebacker. Like they just don't swing and miss very often there. They're a place that knows they can't afford to, and they don't. And they look good. Again, I think they're better to significantly better than I expected them to be, and I didn't think they'd be bad.
Josh, last thing for you. I remember talking to you in the offseason. You were pretty high on Miami. Have they exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, they have. They are. Well, see, yes is the answer. However, let's also say the same thing about them that we just said about LSU. All right, let's see them against a pretty high-level, potent passing attack because we haven't seen that either. Now, they've beaten Notre Dame in Florida, and that's wonderful. They beat USF. That's great. Those are three quality opponents. I'm not taking anything away. I actually want them to do good because I want to be right about something at least. But we got to make sure this is not the NFL. In the NFL, you face another pro team every week. So once you get 4 weeks of sample size under your belt, you're going to have a really good read on every team. It's a case-by-case thing in college football. And the other part about the Miami dynamic is let's say they are exactly what they look like they are. And I think they are, by the way. I'm not doubting them. But even if they are that, all right, they go to Tallahassee next Saturday, which is going to be a war. After that, they're going to be a double-digit favorite pretty much the rest of the way. And my concern for them is if they are as good as we think they are, no one's going to test them. And it's one thing if you're Kirby Smart in Georgia and no one's going to test you, because I don't doubt that place knows what excellence is about. They understand what the standard is about. They understand attention to detail. Miami doesn't have guys that have been there. Their roster hadn't been there. Their coaching staff collectively hadn't been to that level. And what can happen is you can go down that list of the final 6 or 7 games they're going to play, double-digit favorites. You can win with your B-minus game. And what can happen is bad habits can be allowed to creep in. Little bits of lack of attention to detail can creep in, which will not bite you, all due respect, against most of their remaining schedule. What can happen is you get in the playoff and it's a cattle prod to your neck when you face Ohio State, when you face Georgia, when you face Oregon. Because I can promise you they're not dropping the ball. I can promise you they're not letting the rope go any. That would be my hypothetical concern about Miami above and beyond just, is the personnel what we think it is? Is that defense really that legit? Absolutely it is. They're the best team I've seen so far this year. But that doesn't guarantee anything because Ohio State was good last year. They lost 2 games in the regular season. So I don't think that this thing's just written in pen yet. And that's from someone who's looking for every reason to write Miami in pen.
Josh, great stuff, man. Talk to you next week, buddy.
Appreciate it, David.
Later, man.